Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
These are my personal experiences with UFOs. They are all true. Some can be played off as merely misidentifications, and others are full-blown anomalous events that have no logical explanation. I do not mind any skepticism, as theorizing and trying to figure things out is always interesting. I myself am a very skeptical person. Even with the strange things I believe, I always try to think logically first, but when logic fails, the illogical is to be considered. These events mostly took place from around 2016 to 2020. I don't really remember when most stuff happened exactly, but a lot happened mostly from the start to middle points and faded off around the latter. Some of these events happened to me, my father, and friends of my father, and most of them happened with both my father and I together. At the time, we of course didn't have any good recording devices to document them, and the few times we had pictures of them, they looked either terrible or boring. So sorry about the lack of evidence. I too wish I had pictures and footage of these things. Also, these stories won't really be in exact order. I'm going to mostly be telling them both when they happen and those related to them. We will begin at what I believe is the main starting point. These ones are also the least anomalous and have a high possibility of just being misidentifications, with a few caveats in tow. I've also pre-made this, so it should also be around 13 parts in total. Might be more if anything hits the character limit. Around the year 2013. Was like 13 or something, probably around summer. Outer area of Barstow, California. A supreme shithole. 6 a.m. Was up because of reasons. No schedule, was homeschooled, etc., etc. Seeing my dad go off to work, look up at the sky, see light going across it, not an aircraft, pointed out. Dad says it's a satellite. Still thought it was weird, but accepted the answer. Forget about this until some years later. This seems to be the first mover we saw. 2016, around spring, was 15 at the time. It's night, like 10 p.m. or whatever. Be on PC. Dad comes from outside, says, "Look at this shit. Look at the sky, see weird light." It's just a small light going across the sky, flashing every 5 to 15 seconds or so. Looked like a plane at first, but didn't have any of the other lights, also didn't really seem right. We ended up watching it for a bit and saw it again a few more times that night. It would come from one end of the horizon to the other, then take 40 minutes to appear again. In the end, we figured it to be a satellite. Thought that was pretty cool. Usually you can't see those things with the naked eye so easily. After about 2 days of seeing it, it disappears. Don't think much of it. This seems to be the first flasher we saw, but it's different from the rest. I don't think I'd actually call it a flasher. We saw these a couple more times, but they were rare. Probably a week or two later, Dad calls for me again. See what to us looked like a light teleporting in a zigzag pattern. With every teleport it flashes. Super amazed and wondering what it could be. Never saw it again. Later we realized it was probably two just flashers that were next to each other, flashing in turn, but this was before we had names for these. We started looking at the skies more, and ended up spending almost entire nights looking at the stars. At the time, we gave it a 50-50 on them being aliens or secret government tech, or them just being satellites. We saw more movers and flashers around too. At first there weren't many, but over time we saw more and more. We'd never seen anything like this before, which we thought was weird. We tried looking it up, but we'd find nothing. Satellite trackers didn't show shit, nor did aircraft trackers either. Be out one night. Watching the sky is now our nightly deal. Looking at movers and flashers. Some movers are also an in-between of flashers. We call them pulsars. Some pulse faster, some pulse slower. Movers and flashers are also not all the same brightness. Some are so dim you can barely see them. Others are brighter than the brightest star in the sky. We also notice that not all go the same speed. Some would go across the sky in 10 seconds, and some would take over a minute to reach the horizon. Sometimes they'd get brighter or dimmer at random points across the sky. We then realized something. Some were swerving. It genuinely looked like they'd sometimes just swerve, like they'd randomly be avoiding a star in the sky. We decide to mentally mark without saying out loud what stars we'd see the swervers swerve at. They'd swerve at the same time to us. It wasn't just our eyes. What the hell? Still don't really know if it was just our eyes, but it really does seem like some would swerve. With some more than others, it's very strange. Another night, walking out to the backyard. Something isn't right. We both look at two big yellowish bright stars that seem out of place. After a bit, right as we're about to both say something, one fades away, then the other. Holy shit. They were completely out of place to us for whatever reason, but the thing that was weird is that it's like they waited, just for us to have to say something about it. Honestly, it's like it was calling for us, which is a thing I'll touch up on later. We also never really saw anything like it again. A similar story, see a big orangey yellow light moving across the sky. See it a couple nights in a row. Don't see it again. Be around 16. It's morning, bright out, very pretty. Just me, I wanted to walk outside for a sec before I took a shower, then went to bed. Clouds are a sort of tall, white, thunderheady looking set. They're surrounding the area around the valley. Say what you will about the desert, but its skies are beautiful. Looking up, just admiring the view. See a dot moving. Huh. Look at it more. Seems to be a black plastic bag floating in the sky. See it just flying around. It's going pretty fast across the clouds. It's scaling the thunderheads in seconds. It's making breakneck turns. Goes out of view into clouds. Strange, whatever. Now walking inside the house. Something doesn't feel right. By the time I'm in the shower, I realize something. You can't see something at best the size of a soccer ball, at a height greater than most commercial planes. It's also going not just hundreds of miles an hour, but would have been going thousands of miles an hour, all while doing instant turns. Think, wow, that's crazy. And then it hits me. It was also a gigantic black cube. Ended up sitting in the shower for a couple hours thinking and processing that. When it was flying, it was in a diamond configuration, as in the corners were up and down. I can still remember the experience like it was yesterday, and I have no explanation whatsoever for it, at least a logical one. It's probably left the biggest mark on me too. It's at that point I really realized there was more to everything, and that the lights we were seeing could also really be something more. Because of this, we later got a field scope too, and even later after that a night vision scope. We'd use them to watch stuff a lot. Be another night. Dad calls me outside. See a triangle UFO. It's the classic shape, but a lot more rounded. I'd rather call it a bell. Basically image related. Might have had a few different things about it, but it was basically that. It had 3 lights on each corner and one in the middle. They were bluish. Don't remember if the middle was a different color. On the back, it had a sort of set of reddish lines emanating a bluish mist. Might have also had reddish lines on its sides. The whole thing also had a sort of glow to it too. It was completely silent, was very slow, and was around 500 feet high, if even. And it was going directly over our house. We looked at it through the field scope until it passed the horizon. Took like 2 minutes. Proceed to shit bricks after the fact. Alongside the cube, this is basically the point that we not only realized that there could be something more, but that there really is something more, and it's flying directly above our goddamned house right there. This is the most definite of UFOs we'd ever seen, and I can say with absolute fact, more than any other thing, that this shit is not something that's supposed to be possible, at least under our currently taught understandings. Another night, see a light in the sky, it's flashing, think, oh, a flasher. Thing is, it's not moving, it's just there, flashing. It stayed there for around an hour, then went away. Think that was weird. Next night, after a bit, see it again. Huh. It seemed to appear around a certain time, let's see tomorrow. Again, it's there, right on the dot, stayed for 45 minutes, then went away. Next night, gone. Doesn't seem to appear again. It later did appear another like a year or 2 later, around the same area. Ended up doing the same sort of thing all over again. It's like it specifically stops once we get it down to a science. One night, because of course, watching the movers and shit. Suddenly we see what looks like a loose, diminished line of movers in a sort of mist going across the sky in a wave. Think, what the hell is that? Goes from one horizon to the other in about 5 seconds. Based off its size, it had to be hundreds of miles long and had to be going a few 100,000 miles in speed. Never saw anything like it again. That one was also a strange one. To be that goddamn large and that goddamn fast. It's actually insane. We ended up naming that one the Plankton because it looked a lot like a long strand of phytoplankton. Another night, watching movers, see one mover, bright one, going across the sky, then it starts turning. Lol, what? Does a 45-degree loop-de-loop, then keeps going. Never see anything like that again. Now I'll tell one of the stranger ones of the movers. Christmas Eve night, looking at the sky. It's partially cloudy. As it starts getting cloudier, we start seeing more movers, and more, and more, and more. What the hell? We're seeing thousands of movers, but it looks like they're hiding behind the cover of the clouds. Is this an invasion? Over time, the clouds let up. Movers go back to normal. For a moment, we thought we were having an alien invasion. This tails into a weird thing about the movers that I'm sure you've noticed by now. Nobody else sees them, so I'll talk about that now. The movers, the flashers, the pulsars, the swervers, the stationary things, and the plankton. They looked a lot like stars, same sort of size with varying brightness, basically always a whitish blue, discounting the other things. Whatever these things are not just seen, they're not normal by any means. Nobody talks about that, from what I can tell. There's no reports, footage, anything. The years my father spent looking up at the sky, he never saw them. My father would go to work and talk about them, but other people didn't see them, even after being told what they were and how to find them. Only when it was night shift, my father was able to point them out in person to others. And then something strange happened. The people he pointed them out to could now see them. But it wasn't like they just didn't notice them. No, they were not appearing for them. They wouldn't show themselves. Once they saw them, they could show them to others and they'd see them too. It was a sort of cognito meme or whatever. If you've never seen it, you can't see it, but once you see it, it's everywhere. I don't really know what this truly implies, but it leads me on to this other talking point. They can read your mind. Sounds insane, but UFOs reading your mind isn't a new concept. We'd spend a whole night staring at the sky and nothing would happen. But if we talked about them, they just start appearing. Sometimes we'd see 100 movers in a single night, other nights only 10. We also came to the conclusion they'd try to distract you. They'd have a bright mover go across the sky and then out of direct view of that, have a couple movers going across out of view, as if they wanted to sneak by you. It's weird to say, but it felt like a game. You'd see one appear and then try to keep your eyes out for the others. They also like to go in pairs. You'd usually see two next to each other, one behind another or following one's path. They'd also like to cross paths a lot. Many times they'd meet together, passing by. They'd usually go north to south too, but others east and west. Never really much else though. A strange happenstance, be me one night doing something outside. Look at the sky and see a mover, then see more and more and even more. And holy shit, the whole sky is moving and changing colors. Looks like image related, like that thing is the sky and Earth is in the middle of it. Shit's going crazy, there's tons of stuff. My mind is blown, I'm staring at the sky screaming. Finally, I knew it, now nobody can deny this. I wake up. It was a dream. I'm disappointed but also thankful. I ended up having a lot of dreams that would turn into that. I don't know what that means, but I also don't like it. Eventually, my father and I came to the conclusion that these movers had to be demons or something. They can't be seen under normal means, are spread from showing them to others, will appear when you think or talk about them, seem to like to hide from you, and would even affect your dreams. Sounds like demons to me, or something like them at least. This segues into a thing my father would see, the ground lights. They were lights that would flash, but about 1 foot off the ground and be bluish-white. They'd only happen once when they did happen. I never got to see it, but our dogs actually saw them though. One of the most confirming moments that they were real was when my dad saw a flash on the ground and then our old, mostly blind dog got up from resting and went all the way across the yard to start sniffing the exact spot it appeared at. Another strange encounter was when my dad was in the backyard, looking at his phone and realized his legs had a shadow being cast. It was a bit shaky, but it was a dim blue light just seemingly hovering in the air behind him, and the moment he turned around it was just gone weird shit, man. These flashes and lights remind me of things like reported hauntings. It's said that if there's a severe demonic presence, such things can appear. There's also another type of flash that'd appear, and it even had happened many years ago. Be my dad, early 2000s, looking at stars because it's cool. Suddenly, a gigantic flash just happened and it came from the sky, like God just took a Polaroid. I have no idea what the hell just happened. This ended up happening another time, and then one more many years later when I was with him. The one I was there for lit up the whole area. I saw my shadow appear on the ground and the light reflect off shiny stuff in the yard. It really was just like having a picture taken with flash. The weird thing is though, every single time my father had had it happen, it appeared exactly where he was looking. Other strange little things happened throughout the years too, but these are the things I've mostly been wanting to talk about. Around 2020 was when we mostly stopped going outside. Life got in the way and stuff. We'd still see movers here and there, but it seems like they dropped off, more than just us not going outside as much anyway. Eventually, we moved out of that hellhole and gone to a place in the southeastern US, and from then on, never saw any movers. It seems like they were in just that area around Barstow. If any of you anons have experienced something like this, please do tell. It'd be very interesting. Also say your general locale if you're willing, since it seems to be a per area basis. Also, sorry about any misspellings and whatnot. Thank you for reading this.
I see them over Navajo Mountain and Zion Park in Utah. I live in Arizona, all as you described, but I've never seen a cube, disc, or triangle. Only lights are far off. They seem to chase each other back and forth all night over the mountain peak. I did see a foggy moon fly over my mom, and tonight, it stopped and faded away when I shined a light at it. Then I said, "I know you're there," and shined the light again. It then faded back into view, but then grew and dispersed almost like a bubble popping. I saved this video from another thread. This is pretty much what we saw. Clear sky, but a slow-moving, soundless light shrouded in fog gliding through air over us. Almost dropped my steak.
It was the late 1990s, and Peggy was getting tired on her long journey from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. An inviting-looking motel sat on a grassy hill in California City, approximately halfway between Bakersfield and Barstow, and Peggy decided to settle down in the warm embrace of the place's vintage charm for what she hoped would be a peaceful night's rest. This, however, was certainly not to be the case. Peggy would later describe the scene as horrendous in an interview with Jason Offutt. It was later that same evening, and Peggy had settled herself into her cozy room, already going about lazily viewing whatever was on VH1 when someone knocked on the door. Approaching said door and opening it as far as she could without unhooking the chain, she could hear a male voice asking to be given some bed linen, but couldn't see anything at that point. As she continued to survey the outside for the source of the voice, she suddenly came to the heart-stopping realization as to what exactly she was looking at. There was no human outside that could have spoken those words, but what there was instead was an enormous cockroach. This creature was seemingly positioned as if stood upright and was cleaning its legs frenetically. It was roughly 6'5". Once she'd noticed it, it seemingly didn't take long for it to notice her as well. Upon realizing that it was being watched, the horrific creature spat a brown substance toward her. Understandably terrified, Peggy screamed, prompting the brutish bug to utter the word, "Why?" She gave no response, and figured that the best course of action would be to rush past the monster. She threw the door open and ran down the corridor, passing the slumped body of an unfortunate motel employee. The voluminous vermin scuttled down the hall behind her. Just as she was nearing the exit, the hideous critter caught up with her and grabbed onto her cotton dress. It wrapped its doubled barbed hands around her wrists, and its chitinous antennae brushed against her face. Presumably due to the terror of the situation, Peggy's vision started to grow cloudy as she neared the point of fainting out of fright. However, just in time she remembered an action movie that she had previously seen, and decided to emulate one of the maneuvers performed by Chuck Norris. She dropped her body down and used this momentum to kick the creature's ankles out from underneath it with her tennis shoes before kicking it in the face for good measure. Stumbling to her feet once again, Peggy took off running once more. In a continual sequence, seemingly right out of an action horror movie, the cockroach was also able to get back to its feet, or legs, and continued chasing its terrified prey. It was nearly upon her when she reached the door at the end of the hallway. She threw it open as quickly as she could, before immediately turning and slamming the door shut onto one of the monster's antennae. The creature emitted a high-pitched shriek of a volume and pitch unlike anything Peggy had ever heard before or since. As Peggy cleared the hotel and sprinted out into the cold nighttime air, a young man who happened to be at a nearby payphone witnessed the monstrous cockroaches pursuing her. Presumably not believing his eyes, he immediately called the police. Almost instantly, 2 police cars careened onto the scene, prompting the mutant monstrosities to scuttle off out of view, disappearing over a nearby hill. She finished her story by noting how quickly insects are able to breed, and by bringing up conversations she'd allegedly had with the locals in the area. They said that they'd been seeing things flitting behind trees, thus leading Peggy to wonder out loud if the colossal cockroaches that had so traumatized her that one night were now breeding out of control in the Californian wilderness.
I was around 6, but the memory is etched in the back of my skull for eternity. I lived in a tiny blue house in the town of Barstow, California. I remember my mother going out the door promising to return soon, and how heavy my eyelids felt. "I'll go take a nap until she returns," I told myself. When I awoke in my bed, however, something was indeed off. I was now staring at someone's back. They were laying on their side facing the wall while I was more towards the end of the bed near the exit. The oddest part about this man was that he was in a business suit from what my naive mind could make out, but his skin, it was green. The only piece of his actual body I could see was the tiny exposed nape of his neck, which sure enough was as green as the Wicked Witch of the West. Dumb comparison, but is the best I could come up with. His hair was black and cut short. I don't think this was sleep paralysis because the moment I took in all of these details, I slowly crept up out of the bed, watching my new visitor with a keen gaze. I silently moved towards the door and looked back one final time before leaving to see that he hadn't moved an inch, as if he were just silently sleeping next to me the whole time. When I returned to my room a couple hours later, he was gone. So does anyone have some answers about this mysterious green man?
Just your friendly neighborhood anon.
Be younger me, 2016, midnight, sitting on the porch talking to my dad and brother. While they're talking, I get sidetracked and start staring to the sky. Everything seems normal until I see a strange line of 3 whitish-yellow lights in the sky, weird-looking stars. Then they slowly start moving and slowly turning in a soft zigzag pattern. I continue to silently stare. Try to get attention of my brother, but he won't look because he thinks I'm making it up. Dad keeps talking to brother and doesn't hear me. I glanced back up and watched it almost teleport with how fast it was going to disappear behind the tree line. Go back inside and try to sleep with the knowledge of what I just saw. Finally, fell asleep.
Location and date: near Barstow, California, July 1995. Midnight. 5 young men had gone into the Mojave Desert to shoot their rifles and camp for the night. 3 of the group had gone to bed while the other 2 stayed up talking and working by portable light on a dirt bike. After a while, they heard a strange humming sound, and their portable light went out. Looking up, in the light of the full moon, they spotted a large black circular object slowly moving over their camp. Startled and curious, they followed the craft hoping to make out more details. After about an hour, they lost sight of it over a hill. They headed back to camp, but lost their way. After wandering about for nearly an hour, they came upon an old state park dumpster in the middle of the area used for dirt bikes. Then, from within the masonry wall surrounding the dumpsters, they heard loud crashing sounds like if someone was tossing garbage around. One of the men walked around to an opening in the wall intent on asking directions from whoever was there. He noticed a tall, blond man, clean-shaven and wearing a golf shirt and dress slacks, both stained with motor oil and muck, wildly tossing garbage around as he searched for something in the dumpster. The camper asked the blond man if he knew how to get back to town. The man responded that he was not from around the area, that maybe the government knew. The campers asked the man what he was doing out in the middle of nowhere dressed as he was, but he ignored them, held up a bullet-riddled radiator, and asked them what they thought of it. Concerned, the two campers moved back from the stranger. They then looked around for a car, but saw nothing. Just then, a helicopter flew over the hillside and shot a blinding light down on the group. Though the two campers do not recall the man leaving the dumpster, they turned to talk to him, and he was gone. An instant later, the helicopter veered off in the direction of a glowing green light that was steadily rising in the sky. Neither camper remembered anything after that. They woke up leaning against the masonry wall sometime after 6 a.m.
This is a true story my friend told me. Creeps me the fuck out just thinking about it. Barstow, California friend driving at night. Fixing up a visit with an old friend I hadn't seen in a while. She worked at a fast food place in town. Shift wouldn't end for about 3 hours. Friend sees a hitchhiker on way, figures fuck it. Said he seemed alright. About 15 minutes into the drive, the guy starts acting off and saying really dark shit. Friend manages to keep things somewhat stable, sort of appeasing the guy, etc. They get to Barstow. Guy basically demands they stay in contact and asks for all my friend's info. Dude, you tripping.jpg. Kicks weirdo out of the car. Friend leaves and goes way on the other side to his friend's job. Goes in, says hi, tells her he's gonna nap out in the car on the side of the restaurant. Absolutely no one else around, no cars, nothing. Wakes up a little over an hour later. Opened the switchblade left on his hood. Last time he ever did anything like that, obviously.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.